Good morning, everyone. It is 11 a.m., so we're going to start our webinar here shortly. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds for people to filter in. And for those of you just joining now, the session is going to start shortly here. We're just giving a couple seconds for people to come in, get situated. Okay, it is 11:01, so we'll get started today. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us for our 20th annual Katz Policy Lecture, Closing the Gap, Women, Caregiving, and the Fight for Financial Stability in Older Age. The Katz Policy Lecture was established in 2007 in honor of the late Sidney Katz, MD, Benjamin Rose's distinguished scholar. Dr. Sidney Katz, physician, scientist, teacher, mentor, author, and public servant, pioneered the concept of active aging, championed the development of the field of geriatric care, and was responsible for the creation of local and national programs to enhance quality of life and improve long-term services for older adults. We're honored to have you join us to continue Dr. Katz's mission in championing services and care. This webinar is a great opportunity to engage with subject matter experts from across the United States, and we encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, as we have saved time for questions at the end of the keynote. We may not be able to get to all of your questions during today's program, but we will follow up with you after the program in the next few weeks. Please note that today's session will be recorded and available on our resource library at www.benrose.org, and PowerPoint slides will be distributed via email to everyone who registered. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking the two C's at the bottom of the screen at any time, and staff are monitoring chat for any technology-related questions or concerns. This lecture is approved for 2 continuing education units by the State of Ohio Counselor, Social Work, and Marriage and Family Therapist Board. At the end of the program, I will drop a link to the evaluation in chat. The evaluation is open to everyone to complete, but it is mandatory for everyone seeking continuing education units. The link to the evaluation will also be circulated to your emails after the program. We ask that you give us 5 business days to process the CEs. Okay, so this year's lecture will feature keynote speaker Judith Kozlowski, JD. Judith is an independent elder justice consultant and a subject matter expert in financial exploitation of older adults. She is a senior fellow at the Women's Institute for a Secure Retirement and contractor with the Native American Elder Justice Initiative. She's an elder justice advocate specializing in financial abuse and exploitation of older adults and frequently conducts trainings on those topics. She also speaks frequently about financial literacy and the cost of family caregiving. She is a former state and federal fraud prosecutor, and her policy work includes being a senior elder justice advisor to the HHS Assistant Secretary of the ACL, building the CFPB Office for the Financial Protection of Older Adults, working with the Department of Justice's Elder Justice Initiative and consulting with AARP, the National Adult Protective Services Association, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, the Securities Industry and Financial Associations Commission on Law and Aging, among others. She speaks frequently at national aging conferences and roundtables, and she is currently co-chair of the American Society of Aging's Economic Security Advisory Board. She is a founding board member of the National Center for State and Tribal Elder Justice Coalitions, a member of the NAPSA's Committee Against Financial Exploitation, and a board member of the Spry Foundation and of Iona Senior Services. That was a mouthful. Please join me in welcoming Judith.
Yes, maybe. Okay, now I get to start. Thank you so much. I am incredibly honored to have received the invitation to do this lecture today. This is one of my very favorite topics to talk about, and I hope that everyone here will learn something that they didn't know before this started. I know that I will, given the other experts who are going to be talking this afternoon. I just want to say one thing before we get started, and one is that caregiving falls on women. I think many of us know that, and the bulk of it starts very young. And yet at this point, I am so tired of hearing how resilient I am and how resourceful I can be. So let's find out how ways we can be resourceful and also still be able to continue our caregiving in best possible ways. All right, shall we go to the next slide? So, what are the opportunities and challenges and some of the policy opportunities that we're going to talk about today? Some of it is just the recognition of the physical, emotional, and psychological stress of caregiving. I think sometimes we overlook those pieces. We talk a lot about the money, which we'll talk about today, but also there is a strain that goes with that, and some of it comes from the physical, emotional, and psychological stress of caregiving. Also, for us to take a really good look, a deeper dive into what the recognition is of the financial strains for caregiving, both to the person who's being cared for and for those of us doing the caregiving. Also understand and take a really good look at the changes in family structures. We have changed so much in this country where there isn't, people are not living around the block from their parents or their family. They're living across the country. And I think that will make a big difference in the way we look at how we're going to be caregiving and the ways in which we're going to look at the financial challenges that that brings. The wage gaps and workplace policies we'll talk about more because they are significant and they impact women much more than men in most circumstances, and looking at the long-term financial impacts on women's lives as we care for others. So those are some of the things we'll hit today, and I'm welcoming anyone of our experts who are signed in to also interrupt me any moment to add something to any of my remarks. Next. So what are some of the unique challenges that women face? One, we earn less in the workplace. I think that the numbers are now, women generally earn 81 cents to the dollar. Black women earn 64 to 69 cents to the dollar, and brown women 55 to 57 cents to the same dollar that a white man earns in the marketplace. We also take time away from work. Sometimes I think the calculation is that over the course of a working life, women generally take an average of about 9 years away from their full-time job to care for others, be that children or older members of their families. They often go to part-time work, also affecting their retirement, also affecting their actual cash available to do the caregiving. That means, of course, less in savings, less in pensions, and less available for care. Women live longer and not necessarily planning for that longer life, and they often live alone in retirement. I think the statistics now are that over 50% of the women over the age of 65 are living alone. Either they are single, they are divorced, or they are widowed, or they have always chosen to live alone. So those are 6 of the big ones that are the unique challenges for women in preparation for caregiving. Yes, Anna?
I was going to just jump in and say that when people have had time away from work and they try to go back to their jobs, they frequently end up going back at lower pay or not into the same jobs, and they're prices that they just never realize until it happens to them.
Yes, and I think one of the things I thought about in preparing for this today was something from The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy says to Toto, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. When you start this journey of caregiving, you really have changed so many different things about your life and your life expectations. And I think that certainly, Anna, your point is well taken. I think that's something I was going to talk about later, but it is that. It's not only that there is also discrimination as women come back into the workforce after being gone for a while. And again, for facing, as you said, a lesser paying job than they had before, again, affecting even further savings and retirement. Next, please. So are you a caregiver? Well, if you're not at the moment, there's a very good chance that you will be one some point in your life. And you become a caregiver for a spouse, a relative, or a friend. It can happen anytime. And it often happens when you're nearing your own retirement. So even if you feel like you've financially prepared for your own retirement, you've saved, you've matched, you've put IRAs, you've done everything that you know to do, you may suddenly find yourself very unprepared to manage the actual costs of caregiving. another piece of this is the person you are caring for may not have been as prepared as you might have made yourself for your own retirement, and therefore having that additional cost on your shoulders, as well as you manage not only your own preparation for retirement, but the new costs of caregiving as well. So if you can, do everything you can to avoid compromising your own financial security and your own retirement as you prepare to be a caregiver. I've been at conferences where I've given a similar talk to this one. I've had people come up to me and say, but I did everything I was supposed to do. I took care of it, but I realized when I started caregiving that I had to contribute more money to that person. And I took all my retirement money out. I spent that money on taking care of someone. And now I'm faced with, as Anna points out too, I am now, this woman particularly said, I'm in my early 60s and I have to go back to work because I've exhausted my retirement because of my caregiving. So if anything else you take from this talk today, please keep your own financial security and your future in mind as you enter the world of caregiving. Next. So we use caregiver as a very broad term. It can be providing personal care, health monitoring, coordination of care, household work, financial assistance, or acting as the social director to keep an older adult or someone you're caring for socially connected. Right now, approximately 53 million Americans provide unpaid care to a relative or a friend over the age of 50, and those numbers may be higher. Between 2020 and 2060, the number of older adults is projected to increase by 69% from 56 million to 94 million, almost 95 million people. Most of those older adults will need at least 3 years of care, and again, in varying degrees, and 1 in 5 will need more than 5 years of care. There is a caregiving crunch coming, and you can see it in several states where there are many more adults who need care than there are caregivers available. And one thing that we should remember is that as we're looking for caregivers, how we want to structure that care to include some of what we would do as well as what someone or a caregiver can do. This has been affected a lot because many of the caregivers that we've used, at least in the area where I live, have been from a variety of different countries. They are recent immigrants, and because of some recent decisions, many of them have moved to other places or taken other types of jobs. Next. So who are the unpaid caregivers? They're all of us. 41.8 million Americans provide unpaid care to a relative or a friend over the age of 50, and 2/3 of them are women. I would think too that maybe those numbers are again higher because this is no matter what report comes out, we're already ahead of whatever those numbers might be. Important to understand that the caregiver shortage will be extremely important as we move forward and as the population demographics shift. On average, a caregiver spends about 24 hours a week providing care. I took care of my parents both of whom lived to nearly 100, both my mother and my father, and I spent about 12 years taking care of them while working full-time, while raising my 2 daughters, and I figured I spent about 30 hours a week with my parents. So I had a 40-hour-a-week basically job and a 30-hour-a-week parent job. And then somewhere in there was my family. So I understand how stretched people can feel and also how important I felt it was to provide care, at least in time, for my parents while managing their health care, their finances, and their social care as well. More than 21% of the people spend more than 40 hours a week providing care, and often that is of necessity because their individuals are not able to have anyone else take care of someone that they're taking care of, or there are not facilities available for someone or programs for them to use. As on average, caregivers spend 4.5 years providing care. I did like basically 6 for each parent. So I always put that number as higher because care can start earlier than you think it is because there may be small needs. You start to provide those, and over time you become more involved in caregiving. Next. So women are, as we, I think, all know, actually the real caregivers here. We spend most of our time caregiving, and we're much more likely to be the caregiver in a family or friend situation than a man. The majority of women give little or no thought to their own financial situation. I plead guilty. I did exactly the same thing. I didn't really think about it at first. I was trying to, I leaped with my heart instead of my head, and did things for my parents that were, which I didn't probably need to do from a financial situation, but I still wanted to take care of them. And because I did, I really wasn't thinking about my own finances. I eventually, I came back to thinking about myself, all the saving that I'd done, all the retirement planning. But I do think even over all those years, they very often would do things for my parents out of my own money and not think about the impact that would have on me. More startling to me is 1 out of 5 women have no retirement savings. That's a rate twice as high as among men. I was listening to something the other day on the radio talking about women and retirement savings, and the numbers I think are higher than even 20%, because many women have done exactly as we were talking about earlier. They have been in and out of the workforce. As they come back into the workforce, they continue to get lower paying jobs, and often those with no retirement benefit as part of their job, and then not making enough money to save equivalently as they had for retirement savings. Further, women are 3 times likely as men to retire earlier. And that is often because they become a caregiver within the family circle somewhere, with friends, taking care of sometimes children who have special needs. That earlier retirement, again, is another financial jeopardy that women need to think through before they retire earlier to become that full-time caregiver. This is across everything that I've ever read on all the studies I've ever said, that women, 1 in 5, it's 20%, say that their financial situation has worsened because they've taken on the role of a caregiver. That number is higher in a lot of underserved communities. It is particularly high in a lot of Native American communities. It's really quite it's higher there than it is in some of the other communities, that the Black community and the Brown community as well. Again, it comes back to not thinking through what it means financially to become that caregiver. And going back to the very first point is that people who are caregiving give little or no thought to their own financial situation. And as Anna was pointing out too, a lot of times people with children with significant disabilities have not necessarily taken into account financially what that means, because so many different things change over whatever programs might be available when that child turns 18. Sometimes that changes with different ages of that person and the financial contributions that need to be made in order to care for that individual. Next. So what's the impact? Just about everywhere, as far as I can say. There is 61% of the caregivers report making adjustments to their work. Some of the things that I have seen about how women turn themselves inside out when it comes to caregiving, to be able to continue to give the care that they want to, in addition to working. The easy ones look like I've heard this, and I'm sure many of you have too. Just say, oh, I'll just go part-time. Well, what does part-time really mean? Even if you stay in the same job that you had, I looked at that in the job that I had, for example, and I thought, well, I'm working a 5-day-a-week job now. Maybe if I cut to 4 days a week, that would be, I would just be cutting a few hours out and see what that looks like. Well, you know what that did? It reduced my health care by 50%. My employer would only cover 50% of my health care. So I had to make up for that with taking one day off. Then if I would also have to cut all of my, any of my sick time, any of my annual leave, all were affected in a 50% range and not in a 20% range. So going part-time for me became not something I was going to do because I was suffering consequences that were much more expensive for me on every level, both in time and money. So I couldn't figure out how I could do that. Some caregivers report making adjustments by taking leave. Some will have the availability to take FMLA, which of course sounds great because you can take a chunk of time to care for someone and then come back into the workforce. But again, you're often not coming back to the job that you left, but a different job, often with less money and fewer benefits. The other thing that I've read much more about is that women that as they become caregivers have stopped taking promotions because that promotion means more time, more effort, and although more money, it often means that they can't have the flexibility that's necessary for being a caregiver. There are estimates that women who are caregivers pay about $7,400 annually out of pocket. I've also seen numbers as high as $8,000. And that's across all demographics. That's not just a particular socioeconomic group, that's everybody. And I plead guilty to that all the time because I would see when I was taking care of my parents, for example, if there was a sale at the drugstore on something that they needed, a particular cream or some other personal care product, and it was on sale, bingo, I was right there. I wasn't taking time to see if that was the what to do. I paid for that out of my money and not necessarily figuring out a way to have that be part of the care that my parents were also having to share, if not pay fully. But I think that is the kind of money that becomes invisible. We all do it. We don't think about it. It comes out of our pocket, but then we turn around and then we don't have the availability to use that other $7,400 or $8,000 annually. Over time, that adds up to a lot because the average amount of caregiving, as we saw before, was 4.5 years, but even 4 years times 7,500 is a significant amount of money that could be used for you, for your own financial well-being, to save for retirement, or to save for something else. The estimates are also that caregivers lose about $324,000 in wages, Social Security benefits, and private pensions over their lifetime. I've seen that number as high as $1 million for women who have lost those wages, Social Security benefits, and pensions over their lifetime. Again, these numbers are from 2019 and it's now 2026. We've also been all the issues we have with both inflation, then the cost of living that has escalated over that period of time. Nonetheless, it's more than $250,000 and about $8,000 a year that caregivers lose as part of being a caregiver. Okay, next. Yeah, Anna's point's a good one. Women are also, and from Carol Sewell, that women are seen as less reliable employees when they take time off. I mean, I've seen this over and again with, maternity leaves as well. Any kind of leave that a woman takes in the course of the workplace is often viewed as a weakness when it comes to actually being able to perform the work. And that's a socio-economic pillar that we have a long way to go to rectify, but I think nonetheless that is the kind of thing that affects the women who are especially needed to provide the care that they're doing for family members or for others. Again, we've said the women are in and out of the workforce an average of 9 years. That 9 years has tremendous impact on Social Security, has tremendous impact on retirement savings over time. And that those 9 years are not the kind of 9 years you see generally from male caregivers. I'm sorry. The women are the ones who are expected to take time off. They're the ones who are expected to come in and out of the workforce, to go part-time, to make the adjustments in their own careers in order to provide caregiving. And that impact on their ability to take care of themselves in later life is profound. I can't say enough times, I can hear Cindy in my ears right now. It's important to have a plan, to continue to plan. Even if you are taking time out of the workforce, what are the other possibilities that you can look to be able to, while not making up the same amount of money, to be able to have some floor, some financial floor that you can look to maintain while you are caregiving during those times. Again, many women also live alone in retirement. They're saying now about 50% of the women over age 65 are single, versus 18% of the men. That 50% is a big number. And I tend to think it might be increasing over time, because we're finding more and more women as they're aging are women who did not marry, who are solo and have continued to age into a time in their life where they may also need to be not only caregivers for others, perhaps in their family or friend circles, but also that will need care themselves. And I think Anna will talk more about solo aging when we get to some of those points too. So women need tools to manage their finances. They need, as caregivers, they need information about how the impact of caregiving on their own finance, what is the impact on their own finances and their retirement security. And as providers of care, they need to understand how to oversee the financial tasks of the people they're taking care of. One of the things that I was responsible for in my caregiving was I had to take care of my parents' finances 100%. And they weren't the same. They were, my mother worked, my father worked. They had different pensions. They had different retirements. They did separate investing. They had lots of their own accounts, as well as some shared ones, to be sure. But I had to understand what those accounts were, how they worked, what was the best way to liquidate them if I needed to for their care, what were the mechanisms that I needed to understand under my power of attorney, what I was able to do and what I wasn't able to do, and all of those things. There are some, as Anna's pointing out, there are good documents from the CFPB on managing other people's money and the responsibilities that go with being a power of attorney. But again, we'll get a little bit to that later, but you need to know what kind of power you have. Don't assume because you have a power of attorney, it's good for everything. Next slide, please. So here are the legal documents. There's a durable power of attorney. That is the type that will allow you to act on someone's behalf and to make financial decisions for that person while that person is alive but incapable or unable to, or you have been designated to make some financial decisions for that person. Is there a healthcare power of attorney or a healthcare proxy? It could be you or someone else who's appointed to make healthcare decisions. Make sure if you're with a group of individuals or part of a family, you know who has which powers to do what, because those may become very important and have significant economic consequences at some point. If there is a living trust, which transfers ownership and title of your assets to a trust, who would be in control of that trust, who are the trustees? That would be similar to a financial, that may have also some of the same elements as a financial power of attorney. And is there a will? A lot of times people think that there's a will, but they can't find the will, and then they don't look and see whatever. It's really important, more than anything else, to make sure all of these documents are up to date. The other thing I point out, which is orders on life-sustaining treatment, I think that this is one of the key pieces that people sometimes don't look at. It's different than a healthcare power of attorney, but these orders on life-sustaining treatment are the kinds of things that allow someone who is taking care of you to know when it might be time to not give certain types of life-sustaining treatment, because that would be not what that individual wants. but you need to have these conversations with the individual you're taking care of to be able to do that. Most important of all, make sure all of the beneficiary designations are up to date. Often people will do these documents and let everything slide for 15 or 20 years. Things have changed. People's affections have changed sometimes. Sometimes people who were beneficiaries are no longer alive. So all of those things can have significant impact on the financial documents that of the person you're taking care of. And again, you have to know where the documents are located. Who is your team? If you have an individual who has a lawyer, figure out who the lawyer is. If there's has an accountant, know who the accountant is, know where the bank accounts are located if they're there, because it's really important to have just a few pieces of information to be able to use that information when you're taking care of someone. Next. Okay, this is my housing. Housing is often the most valuable asset in a family, but people who are in caregiving situations are often afraid of using any of the equity for caregiving. That can be done in ways that can be beneficial. My big question here is be care of predatory lending and be careful of reverse mortgages. That doesn't mean they're all horribly and terrible. They can be very important, but you need to know what you're signing. You need to know, if you're the caregiver, you need to know what the circumstances are. When I was at the CFPB, we saw many families who had signed onto reverse mortgages in order to get to free up some available cash from the equity of their home, only to find that once the person whose name was on the deed had passed away, the sometimes remaining spouse living in the house was no longer able to live there. The bank took over the home, and he or she was out the door. It's really important to understand all of the provisions in the reverse mortgages, and the CFPB has one of the best publications on reverse mortgages. So I would caution everyone to take a look at that. The other thing to look at is the reason why people are afraid or want to, sometimes not use their house for equity is because the maintenance has become too high. In some cases, mitigations may well be available through a lot of the utility companies will sometimes have some mitigation or some ways of having lower cost for people on fixed incomes. The other question is property taxes, which as far as I know, there's no fix for that. They have just continued to escalate as the value of property has escalated. But it is certainly something to take into consideration. And if you are caring for someone, you also have a power of attorney over their finances. You might take a long look at what that would mean with regard to the payment of property taxes over time. Often, especially in moderate and lower income families, the questions become the payment for housing. I mean, it might be property taxes versus food and the escalating cost of food, as we're all aware of, and the escalating cost of medicines, especially as some medical and plans, such as Medicare and Medicaid, have been changed or will be changed or are predicted to be changed. Their medicine may cost much more, and that would again put more of the burden on the caregiver to either look at where we can address some of those issues from a financial standpoint, or also to look at what the assets are available that might be used. Also, increasing rents are also wreak havoc on fixed incomes. This also, also hits the caregiver so much because it also puts a lot of pressure on the caregiver so that person can no longer save at the same rate she used to be able to save perhaps for a down payment for a different type of housing for herself, and also just the facing the discrimination in mortgages. I mean, I certainly know that women are still discriminated against when they go to get mortgages. I don't care what anybody says. They're looked at in a different way. But I also think it might be something to consider, because the housing asset may be an asset. It depends on how, as a caregiver, you or your family wish to preserve that asset, what that asset would mean, and the cost of keeping the asset? Or is it better to look at a different solution, which may be selling that asset in order to put those monies into trust in some way for the person you're caring for? There are all kinds of things, and as one of our someone just mentioned, it's also incredibly important to make sure that even though you may have that asset available to you, it doesn't disappear in a nanosecond when you've looked at the cost of what assisted living is. Next slide, please. So what are some of the financial steps for protecting the caregiver's well-being? So think carefully about the potential consequences of leaving your full-time job. I think we've talked about that a little bit today, but I mean, really, it's so important because it's not just reduced income, it can affect your health insurance and your future benefits. This is the same thing that I was talking about before. Also, another good point about a trust. You have to make sure that that trust, if you're going to put assets in trust, that they are also not depleted when you look at moving to some sort of assisted living or congregate living situation. It may look like a lot of money for a while, but you have to look at how that money would be used by the place where placement would be made. Assess your other resources as a caregiver. What are the things that you also have that we wouldn't solely be responsible for providing your care? And my goodness, this is something that I think Cindy will talk about in a little bit. Ask for help. Setting up family agreements, also setting up and talking to people. I mean, you can talk to, I talk to everybody. That's my problem sometimes, but I get as much information as you need and talk about with your family or your friends, however you're doing this, about setting up family care agreements. They can really make a big difference in how that care goes forward. And make a plan for managing your own money and saving for your own retirement. Even if it's not as much as you wanted to, something is better than nothing. Just continue to do it and continue to plan for your own retirement with whatever your income streams may be. What is your health care going to look like? What about housing? What about food? What about Medicare, your medical issues? I mean, I think those are all the things that you need to think about, but don't forget to ask for help from any and everyone you can find. Next. These are some of the things we talked about: leaving a job and working part-time. Please, please, please exhaust every other option before you leave or reduce your hours for all the reasons that we talked about. Even staying for an extra year can make a huge difference in your retirement. It may make a huge difference also in your Social Security. And investigate whether FMLA is an option where you work or not. Some smaller companies don't offer that. But it doesn't hurt to ask if there's some kind of equivalent that might be available to you. And also look at the healthcare options and costs. Are you spending too much? Should you spend more for getting a bigger benefit? And also, before you leave a job, also consider what is the retirement vesting and what are the benefit schedules. Can you work at least until you are fully vested in whatever retirement scheme they may have? And if that is available to you, try to make it work in whatever way you can, because that will provide a cash flow for you while you are caregiving. Oh, and I cannot say this enough times: resist the urge to cash out retirement benefits. I was talking to Megan, I think yesterday, about some individuals who left a large plant that closed, and many of them took the entire cash out of their retirement benefits instead of annuitizing those benefits. And often what they found was the employee who had the retirement benefit didn't live very long after that, and the spouse who would have then had the benefit of annuitized retirement benefits no longer had any benefits. So really look long and hard before you cash out anything. If you're going to cash it out, roll it into something else that will provide for you some sort of continued income stream. Next. See, these are some of the special caregiving challenges for some of the underserved communities. I've also been doing a lot of work in Native American communities, and I can see all of these applicable to there as well as others. What is the cultural context in which the care is given? That makes a big difference in the way you might approach that care. What are the language issues? Is there a limited English proficiency? Are there education levels that are somehow stopping someone from learning more about what those options might be? And are there fewer resources in a particular language that might be available to people who might need those? Also, geography can be a real challenge in caregiving. For many years, did caregiving at 1,500 miles away. I was 1,500 miles from my parents. I used to go and see them on a more regular basis than you want to know. But I took an airplane at 5 o'clock in the morning, basically, to get to where my parents were, to be able to get them to their doctors by 11 o'clock in the morning, their time zone, over and over and over again. It's a lot of work. And to be able to work with the geography, as if it's not only from a distance, but also what are the challenges if you are taking care of someone in a very densely populated area versus a rural location. All of those matter in how the caregiving takes place and the cost of those that type of caregiving. And also the changing character of family units, again, distance and economics. I had one particular case where there was a family of 6 kids. Their father needed care. One of the 6 was near the dad. The other 5 were spread all over the United States, but they wanted to help. And what they figured out over time was that each one of them could afford to pay for 1 day a week of care for their dad. So everybody got assigned a week, and then the 1 day that they didn't have kids for, basically, they were able to use their father's assets to do that. But it was a real tribute to the family that they were able to figure out that, because they were literally thousands of miles from where their father was located in order to provide the care that they wanted to. Not every family is that organized, and not every family is that united in how to care for someone in their family, or to be cooperative when trying to set up those kinds of agreements. There's also in many families and in many groups a real distrust of institutions, of government institutions, financial institutions, and healthcare institutions. And that may cause some problems in trying to convince a person you're taking care of to either enroll in a particular program, participate in a program, or even just discuss it. Next. These are the care agreements. I mentioned that Cindy will talk more about. These are just ways of making the care and the payment clear for the caregiver, the recipient, and the family. I've seen these really change how a family approaches caregiving so that it doesn't all land on one person. It generally does anyway, but this can really help avoid family conflicts about who's taking the care, and can also avoid the questions of, like, you were taking money out of the account when you were supposedly, quote, taking care of somebody. If it's all out in the open, it can really make a difference. Next. Okay, so these are action steps for all of us as we're aging, as we're getting to know our own financial statement. What's your Social Security benefit? Understand your spousal benefit, divorced or a survivor benefit. Start an emergency fund. Pay off everything and save for 6 to 9 months of expenses. Avoid common money mistakes, is like paying off other families' debts, grandkids, education, caregivers, all of this. This is wonderful. But it can be tough to do because, again, we think with our heart and not necessarily with our head. And also really key to understand, what are your retirement benefits? Do you have an employer who has an employer-sponsored plans? Do you have IRAs? Is that what you will be depending on? What is going to be the cost of long-term care? Know what you need to age. Know what you need to be cared for, and on top of taking care of others. Next. Okay, these are the money mistakes to avoid. I plead guilty to many of them, but don't delegate your financial management to anybody else. Understand it for you and you alone. That doesn't mean you can't talk to other people. It doesn't mean you can't lean on them, but understand it for you. And saving less for retirement because you're helping somebody else is not going to help you in the end, or the caregiver who will be taking care of you. Cashing out your retirement savings, we talked about when you're switching jobs, just roll it over. Cindy's well known to be, one of the people who's also pushed these all of the rollover plans we have now for in retirement. Also, not getting help if you need it. If you don't understand something, keep poking around until you understand it. Talk to somebody who can talk to you, someone who can explain it, and don't just nod and say yes if you don't understand it. We're all guilty of that because we want to think we can get it, but this is all about your life and your financial life as you age. And one other big thing is don't underestimate how long you will live and the cost of your caregiving and your medical costs. In my family, because I have long-lived parents and long-lived, even great aunts who lived into their 90s, if you can imagine that 2 or 3 generations ago. So I started planning for 100 a long time ago. Now it seems that planning for 100 is what everybody seems to be doing. So think long and hard about how long you may live. Next. So what are some of the public policy solutions? The caregiver tax credit has been talked about a lot. There is some legislation that's been introduced in Congress now, bipartisan legislation on that. But AARP reports that over 1,000 bills within just the last 2 or 3 years have entered state legislatures just to address a caregiver tax credit and credit for respite care, so that there would be some sort of support for caregivers in the states. And right now, I'd have to say that most of the energy and legislative enthusiasm, such as that might be, is going on in the states to address the issues of caregiving. Why? Because the states see much more closely the growing number of older adults and the lack of caregivers to take care of them. So look at your state legislatures and carefully support those who might be also able to or enthusiastic about their caregiver tax credits or respite care. Also looking at some employers are now looking at extended or flexible leave for caregiving. One of the organizations I work with has a caregiving plan now that we have been able to sell to some employers, that we would be able to provide social worker support for employees who are looking at leaving for caregiving, to be able to support that individual both in their workplace as well as in their caregiving, to be able to give guidance to them. And it would be a benefit that was also supported by the actual employer. Wage parity. I can't say enough about that. That's where all of us have lived all of our lives, basically not getting paid for what we do. I think younger women are working more and more effectively in getting pay parity. Financial literacy is also a huge part of this. Although I must say too that it's very clear that even though people know what the right thing is, they often don't earn enough money to be able to do the right thing. And that has been a huge frustration, because they know that even though they save, even if they've done all of the right thing, when it comes time for caregiving, some of that is completely upended because of the cost of caregiving and the cost of their contribution to that care. The other thing that's been proposed in a couple of places is that an employer would provide a small match for an emergency fund. It wouldn't be anything big. It wouldn't be anywhere near any kind of retirement plan, but there could be a small match for an emergency fund should an employee need to take time off for something completely unexpected. Those are some of the public policy solutions. And I'm going to go on to the next slide and talk just for a moment about the 2023 research that's done by both Weiser and the National Council on Aging, NCOA, and looked at where women ages 25 and up, 25, we're not starting at 50, we're starting at 25, looking at why are they struggling today and what can we do to support women over the course of their lifespan. So these are some of the 3 or 4 solutions that I think there were 13 possible policies that were suggested, and I'm going to show you in the next slide. Next. These are the top 3 of the non-Social Security policies. And these received, all those little different columns reflect, different political parties, as well as overall enthusiasm for support. One is to provide a tax break to family caregivers to cover out-of-pocket costs in providing care to a seriously ill, disabled, or older loved one. Also to create a government program that would provide up to 12 weeks of paid leave to workers who need to leave work to care for a seriously ill family member. Similar to, but not identical to, the Family Medical Leave Act. And then also to create another government program to pay for long-term care costs. That's part of this has also been suggested to be included in some of the Medicare and Medicaid provisions, so that there would at least be some relief for families who needed to use long-term care as a solution for their caregiving. Next. This is a little bit about Wiser. Take a look at this slide later, and also take a look at the Wiser has a caregiving hub, which is broken down to the types of caregiving you may be doing and the ways that you can, and the tools that you can use to do the caregiving and resources that you can use to get what you need. Next. There are some of the resources these are from Wiser and AARP. There are many more that we will be sending you. Next. That's it. Thank you very much. I know I've run through all of this. I have like 2 pages of notes here I haven't gotten to, so I know this is a deep and rich topic, and I look forward to learning more from your questions and from those who are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith. This was an incredible presentation, and we're just very grateful that you were able to speak and share all this information. I know the chat's been going crazy, sharing resources and their own policies and experiences, and our panelists have been chatting as well, sharing resources and insights. We'll hop into Q&A just for a little bit. I know Orion and Victoria have been answering some questions, and I'll reiterate those to everyone. But for our first question, is there any research on the effectiveness of women-led co-ops or community living and aging supports that are working to help women caregivers age? I'm interested in what we need more of, or is there not enough research here, particularly longitudinal, seeing success over time?
The answer is I don't know of any, and I've looked, and there may be others here who have seen that, but I've always I'm a big fan of cooperative work anyway, but I would love to see something that would be more a bigger cooperative effort where women could then be able to, in many broader ways, share their experiences to be able to enhance all of our ability to do better. But I have not seen any research on that. I've not seen anybody even do a dive into it. I would love to have that happen. And if anybody ever knows of it, you know how to find me, because I'm right there.
Thank you so much. The next question, well, it's more of a comment here. Look into spousal impoverishment guidelines in your state. They protections apply to those whose spouse needs care at home, as well as those who are in Medicaid waiver funded supportive living or nursing home settings. If you have anything you can speak to on that.
No, I think that not particularly. I think you need to know. Again, this is another, like one of these things, like the shoulders get so sagging down, because it's like one more thing you need to know. What's going on in your state? What are the things that are going to supply? What are the, and I don't know. Wouldn't it be great if every state had some sort of state guide that would be available through either their human resources department or their community living or whatever the states want to call them, to be able to tell you where to look for any of that type of information? Because there are so many people in moderate and lower incomes that are now facing all of the difficulties in caregiving that may well impoverish the spouse who remains. And what happens under those circumstances? Or do you have to impoverish the person that you're taking care of and breaking your heart in the course of that?
I see Orion has a comment on this as well.
I think this is one of those places to put in a plug for the Aging and Disability Resource Centers and the area agencies on aging in the state, because a lot of the questions about the eligibility and the availability of those state programs, including the questions about spousal impoverishment, those can be a good place to start. And a lot of
Yep.
those resources do exist in the States if you start with your area agency on aging
Yep.
as a guide for that.
Yep. 100% correct. I just my brain didn't go there, Orion, but you're absolutely correct. That is the best, and that's where I always send anyone who's talking to me is to just go to your area agency on aging. Start there. If they don't know the answer, at least they can give you a couple more phone calls to make or
Awesome. That
emails
kind
to
of
send or whatever. Okay.
takes care of another question here. Um, is it common for workplaces to offer accommodations for caregivers other than leave, like working from home or working a flexible schedule to accommodate an adult day program or to monitor someone at home?
Is it common? I don't know that it's common. It can be done. It can always be done. And I know that, for example, one of the organizations I work with here in the DC area has an adult daycare program that is extremely successful, but challenging to keep it and to maintain it. But I know several women I know who are only children taking care of their, the parent that they're taking care of, and only can continue to work full time because they can provide, they can drop off at adult daycare and pick up at the end of the day, 5 days a week. She had some problems with her employer and finally described everything that was going on. The employer said, "Oh, no problem. Leave early if you need to. Come in late. I don't care. Just take care of your dad." And that was that. But I think you have to have a real good conversation with your employer. All of those accommodations, it seems to me, can be made. We live now in a whole different world of work after COVID, and it seems to me that you could be able to do that. But the workplace is in flux, as Anna points out.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have time for one more question. I'm going to go into some of the answered questions that I know were answered via typing. What are the dangers of not putting money into a trust?
Well, trust can go both ways. I mean, I've had long conversations with, an accountant that I know well about trusts, and he said, "I don't know. It seems to me trust, you just put money in a trust or to keep it away from somebody else." And he said, "If you don't need to do that, then I don't know that you need trusts all the time." So there can be advantages because if you have a group of individuals in your family, for example, and there's some dysfunction about how that's going to work, a trust with an independent trustee might be the best way to go. Even if you don't have to be like a gazillionaire to do this. I mean, it's just a vehicle, a device in which you can protect those assets. There's a lot of different things that go into a trust. Family trusts aren't always the best, but they can be an excellent tool to be used.
I know, Dr. Barry, you had a comment on that as well.
I think I agreed with her.
Yeah, just my own experience. As I say, a lot of this I've learned as I, would say to other caregivers or potential caregivers. We learned this as we were experiencing it with my mother. And, I think if you've not researched it, you will be shocked to find out how much care costs,
Yes.
especially with something like dementia.
Yeah.
And so the other reason that I recommend a trust is because, individuals are still wholly responsible for all of their own financial decisions until they are deemed incompetent. And oftentimes there can be a lag between the symptoms of dementia and when you can actually get them deemed incompetent. And one of the things that we struggled with was the paranoia that is often a symptom of dementia. Um, and so a silly story that I can give you really quick is, we were all POAs on my mom's bank account, but they can go right in and take you right off. And luckily, my mom had been with the same bank so long that they would call us every time she did something that was just, unusual. And one of the times she called and had taken every penny that she had out of the bank, which was around $250,000, had it put into a cashier's check and left the bank. Luckily, the bank called us and was like, "Hey, your mom just came in and took everything out of the bank." As we were at the house trying to find it because she was in that phase of paranoia and would hide stuff everywhere, I happened to look outside in the backyard and the dog was chewing up the check. And
Mm.
luckily, we were able to get the check, take the pieces back to the bank, and say, please, put this back in her account. And so having that trust, it gives that security that those things won't change. There's somebody else who is deemed responsible for those, and the mother or the parent would not be able to go into those accounts and make those decisions on their own. But as somebody else had mentioned, oftentimes it's hard to find a trusted family member to put in charge of that. And then if you go with actually hiring an attorney, they might be just as bad as assisted living as far as depleting those assets. But it's really a conundrum, especially when you're dealing with someone who might not be amicable or easily handled. My mom would go to the lawyer every 2 weeks. They're out of the will. They pissed me off. They're out of the will. Change the will. Change the will. And we went through that for about a good 4 years before we were able to legally get her deemed incompetent and take over her finances.
So I just want to say one thing because I do a lot of work with banks and financial institutions. They've really worked very hard so that type of thing with the cashier's check that you described wouldn't happen. They would probably stop that because now there's been enough federal legislation to protect them from a lawsuit by your mother, for example, to be able to stop and worry about what that was doing. There are also things called trusted contacts, which are also available to be opened at the same time you open a bank account. And that would be a person who has no transactional authority at all and either an investment account or a bank account, but that person can still be contacted by the bank or by an investment advisor to say, hey, Uncle Fred was in here and all of a sudden he wants to, invest in individual spaceships. I think something's a little wrong here. Can we move on? Maybe you need to help me out here if you can. And so that they have someone to talk to too. But the banks now have a much better solution to issues like you described. Not everybody and not every bank. All I'm saying is that there is an awareness within the financial community on those kinds of issues.
This was an amazing discussion, and we're going to keep going. We're going to move on to the reactor panel section of this presentation. So again, thank you so much, Judith, for all your work today in addressing these issues. We're going to have 4 panelists with us today, with esteemed guests Anna Rappaport, City Council, Dr. Victoria Berry, and Antoinette Smith. So we'll begin with a few questions to get the conversation started, and then we will open up to audience questions. But first, let me introduce our panelists here. So Anna Rappaport is a nationally and internationally recognized expert on the impact of change on retirement systems and workforce issues. She's been posting a lot of information in the chat, so make sure you check out chat to read what she has to say. She is an advocate for women's retirement issues, better opportunities for older Americans, and better understanding of retirement risk and late in life issues. She is a past president of the Society of Actuaries and chairs its committee on post-retirement needs and risks. And she is a phased retiree and formed her own consulting firm after retiring from Mercer at the end of 2004. We also have Cindy Hounselt. She is the founder and president of the Washington, D.C. based Women's Institute for a Secure Retirement, otherwise known as WISER, which is a nonprofit organization founded in 1996 to improve opportunities for women to secure retirement income and to educate the public about the inequities that disadvantage women in retirement. Ms. Hounsell also serves as Director of National Resource Center on Women and Retirement. The center WISER operates in partnership with the U.S. Administration on Aging. And through the center, Ms. Hounsell provides technical assistance to national organizations and trains leaders and grassroots advocates across the country. Moving on to the next slide, Victoria Berry serves as the Manager of External Relations for Cuyahoga County, where she leads initiatives focused on financial empowerment, foreclosure prevention, and community outreach. With a strong background in public service, higher education, and transitioning off public benefits, higher education, strategic partnerships. She works to connect residents, particularly seniors and those transitioning off of public benefits, with resources that improve financial stability, protect home ownership, and build generational wealth. Dr. Berry collaborates closely with municipal and community partners to expand access to financial education and strengthen economic opportunities throughout Cuyahoga County. Antoinette Smith is the Associate Executive Director of Housing and Financial Wellness, always a mouthful, at Benjamin Rose here, where she oversees all housing and financial wellness programs and reporting. She has more than 2 decades experience of direct service for clients who present with multiple needs related to finances, housing, and health. Her work requires managing teams and projects, as well as collaboration with numerous departments and external community partners. And then finally, we have our Q&A moderator, Mr. Orion Bell, President and CEO of Benjamin Rose. He has more than 30 years of leadership experience in not-for-profit management and services for older adults, people with disabilities, and family caregivers. So without further ado, I'll have Orion start with our first question here.
Well, thanks so much, Megan. And if we can turn off the slides so we can have bigger pictures, that would be great. I think this is a great conversation, and it's really timely. And and so in the history of Benjamin Rose, as we do this Katz lecture about public policy and program for older adults, and it's a reminder that the origins of Benjamin Rose was a fund to pay bills for older adults, which led to a lot of conversations about what people needed help with in really just the formations of the field of gerontology and supports for older adults. All comes down to questions about money and the resources to do this, and how timely and important this is today as it was 120 years ago. But so my first question, I'm going to direct this one to Cindy, is that much of the caregiving in families operates through informal expectations rather than out of explicit agreements, often with significant financial consequences for women. What are tools that family caregiving agreements and other resources that caregivers and families can use to help promote long-term economic security?
Can you speak louder? I'm sorry, I'm missing half of what you're saying. Sorry.
We'll try again. Much of the caregiving in families operates through informal expectations rather than explicit agreements, often with significant financial consequences for women. What are tools like a family caregiving agreement or other resources that can help protect both the relationships with the caregiver and the care recipient, as well as the economic security of the caregiver?
I mean, we advise people to have a family caregiving team so that it doesn't end up being the woman who's going to be solo aging, who's used up all her money to take care of her mother or her aunt or someone else in the family. And we see that over and over again. I worry, if people ask me what's one of the biggest worries for people who are caregiving, it's making sure that the money that they have gets used for their care and not for something else. And so I've seen this in my own family where I had a cousin and she had a UTI during the pandemic, and she could have stayed in her assisted living, but nobody fought for her. The people that were taking her money just ended up selling her apartment and using all the money for other things for themselves, trips, whatever. So who's gonna watch the caregiving stash of money that's supposed to be going for your health care?
So Cindy, how do the family agreements help?
Oh, they do help, right? Because you're putting it actually right there and you know who's doing what. I have another story that I sometimes tell where I was doing something at the DC bar, and there was a lawyer that came up to me afterwards and she said, "Oh, this was really interesting. My two sisters take care of my dad." And she said they take turns taking time off from work and then driving across the state of Kansas, taking turns to do this. And she said, and then I come in the summertime and I give each of them a week's vacation. So I said, well, don't you think like they would need like more help during the year, like driving, taking time off, when I hear what her sisters did for a living. And she said, oh, I never would have thought of that. So I think what the family caregiving tool does is make you think of what it costs. One of the resource center programs is the financial costs of caregiving, and you can look up and get links to what's available in your actual community so that they know that the cost of having a nurse's aide isn't $10 an hour. You know what I mean? It's going to be a lot more than that. And that's one of our most popular programs is the financial costs of caregiving.
It
So
it's also really helpful for the family to have a broader aging plan. And the idea of an aging plan is something that uh, it's definitely been documented. There's good resources available, but it hasn't been distributed nearly enough. There's an educational program for advisors developed by Annalie Kruger of Care Right, and it's sponsored now by the FPA. And that I think more aging plans that focus on who's going to do caregiving and how's it going to happen, what's the support system, what are the issues, so that rather than letting things become an emergency, you've focused on it before. One of my big concerns is that things that are left out of planning versus things that are put into planning.
And there was a question in the chat about those caregiver agreements, and I believe there's a template or samples of that or information about it on the Wiser website.
yeah,
Is a good place to go for that.
yeah.
And
I mean,
we'll put that link in the chat if it's not already there.
And
yeah, that'd be great. One of the other things I just wanted to say is to make sure that people really understand what the costs are, you know, for all of these activities and things like the cost of transportation and getting the home health aid. Like, how do you find that? Like through the AAAs. One of the other great resources I think that we've had for a long time is the financial steps for caregivers, and it's like what you need to know about the costs, and we can put that on the homepage so that people can get that easier after this session. So.
Great.
And
Thank you so
I have
much.
one other thing I wanted to mention, that there was an article last week, and I'm just having one of those moments where I can't remember. The CNBC introduced the two bills that were introduced on Capitol Hill for caregiving, so that you're able to open up a Roth IRA even if you don't have earnings. And then there's the catch-up provision that if you're after age 60. So it's one of those things we try to push people into saying, if someone is taking care of your mother for 2.5 years, that person is going to need some retirement income. And what are you doing about that, especially if it's a family member? People aren't afraid to ask once they see the list of things that you can actually get, you know, for taking care of someone.
Great.
If
Thank
you
you.
can get it from your family. I mean, there's the opportunity there. So.
Thanks. So now I want to turn a question to Anna Rappaport. We think about financial planning. I'm sorry. You've written extensively about retirement risk as extending far beyond savings adequacy, and think about longevity, caregiving, housing, health shocks. Given economic pressures, what are the risks you think policymakers still underestimate for older women? And what are some of the structural reforms you'd like to see discussed?
Well, I'm gonna say that sadly, I don't think policymakers are focusing very much on retirement risks at all, even though a little bit, I mean, as you see in some of this legislation, they're often not thinking about retirement policy. One of the things that really makes me very angry is that you hear about these great retirement bills, and these great retirement bills are fine-tuning defined contribution plans, taking care of some of the glitches in defined contribution plans. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's been beneficial to people who have those plans, and it doesn't deal with an awful lot of the issues. What are some of the gaps in thinking about this? The role of family is a huge gap. We're really concerned about solo agers. We have a new set of resources from the Society of Actuaries on family agers. Oh, and I want to add you to, Orion, add to your resource lists some of the stuff we have from the Society of Actuaries. both
Terrific.
consumer education and consumer research. Um, you've heard a lot about how important families are. Housing, you heard a little bit from Judith about that. Housing is the biggest money that that retirees pay out, and you really need planning for housing. And what you don't want, you hear people want to stay in their houses. I understand that. And there's a whole set of things that we have we have some late in life planning resources, and we talk about some of the things to do to keep the house so you can stay in it. But then if you can't stay in it, you want to plan, because what you don't want is you don't want somebody to have an event, be in the hospital, and where do they go? The place where there's a bed. Where do they want to go? Who knows? Who cares at that point? So you want to plan for that in advance. We have a guide with 15 major retirement risks, and so many of them, family, housing, we're not necessarily thinking about. We have several besides family, and the whole issue of caregiving we've been talking about, and it's it's just important to broaden our thinking.
So, so just kind of following that policy question a little further, in thinking about proposals for caregiver credits and Social Security reforms, long-term care financing, what are some other policy innovations, do you think that hold the most promise that we should try to advocate for?
Well, I think caregiver credits are a good idea, but I also think that we need to be careful in thinking about that to see, well, how much of the problems will they really solve? If you go back and you have people that don't have any money for retirement, caregiver credits is like, oh, well, what's that about? One of the biggest issues from and things that bothers me a lot is that we start out talking about retirement savings, and it's the wrong place to start, because you have about a third of the population that are financially stressed. And we do a survey on lifetime by the generations. What are people's financial priorities? About a third of people are financially fragile. And their priorities are not retirement savings. Their priorities are buying groceries, taking care of their children, getting diapers, paying for gas. And the first thing you need to do when you have people that are in that situation is you need to get them stable. And you need to get them where they can pay their bills monthly. You need to prevent them from piling up credit card debt. You need to help them get rid of that credit card debt, pay off those student loans. You need to get them in a situation, if they want to buy a first house, that they can buy that first house. So there's a really basic start around lifetime financial security. When you get them stable, then you can get them to help save money. Some of the matching credits for people who are starting to save money, that's really good. But you need to build with those basics, and then with the defined benefit plans having disappeared, you need to seek plans to be stable, but you also need good minimum Social Security benefits. And this the thing is that that same third of the people that were financially unstable, a lot of them depend on what? Government benefits. What are you seeing going on right now? Get rid of the government benefits, cut them away. You need to keep those government benefits. You need to strengthen those government benefits. So I need to start with the basics, and then when you start with the basics, you can start to build stuff on top of that. So that's probably not what you were expecting to hear. In terms of long-term care, the situation of the United States is there's no system. It's a patchwork. You have Medicaid that pays for a lot of long-term care. Medicaid, one of the things that you need to do is change the eligibility so people don't have to spend down all their assets. And you have Medicaid, food stamps, looking at the eligibility for these things, that would be a really major important thing. And you need to build that up a little bit. You need to focus on those people. I say there's three kinds of people. There's the people that are financially fragile. They're really going to get government benefits. You can get them stable. They can start saving for retirement. There's middle people. They're saving for retirement. You help them do better with saving for retirement. And then there's people that have plenty of money, and we're not talking about those people today. And that's not the main focus of the Society of Actuaries work either. Um, but I would say on the DC plans, strengthening strengthening them and make it easier for them to have match and good vesting. Those are important things. So those are some of the things. Also in long-term care, the federal government really isn't addressing this very well right now. There's a lot of experimentation going on in the states, and I think supporting experimentation in the states to learn about that. And John Cutler has been very involved in some of that. Society of Actuaries has been involved in research on some of those programs. So state experimentation, whenever you get into federal government gridlock, then the states become a good place to experiment.
Okay, thank you.
Anyway, I want to
Yes, Cindy.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something else that used to be talked about a lot and even talked about with the Heritage Foundation. We had people that were supportive of this, and it's the bump up provision at, like, we can choose an age at 82 or 85 or whatever, where there would be an increase in Social Security or some other benefit that would be created that would help people that are living in poverty at that point. So
Well, thank you for that comment as well. So Anna's really set this up for the for the next question, really directed to Antoinette and Victoria. Both of you have your work experience in the programming that you do highlights the role, the possibilities when government and nonprofit and community organizations really can coordinate in true partnership in terms of service delivery. What if, and if you want to take a moment to say a little bit about the Financial Empowerment Center or some of the financial counseling as a setup for that, but talk a little bit about what you've learned in building those collaborations around these financial supports for folks, and that would be helpful for other people as they consider how to address some of the financial challenges we've talked about today.
Go ahead, Victoria. I'll let you go first. We can tell them a little bit about the Financial Empowerment Center, and then I'll go ahead on and answer after that.
Perfect. So the Financial Empowerment Center has really been something that evolved out of our work in foreclosure prevention. We were starting to see the trends of our seniors who were being priced out of their homes. And, having that one-on-one contact with so many of these individuals and understanding all of the unique situations that each of these individuals was facing, what we really realized was that there needed to be a concerted effort on providing financial counseling around some of these situations. For instance, starting to maybe change the narrative. When we were all a little bit, younger, we were told, buy your home. You want to buy a home. It's the only asset that you're going to have that's going to appreciate. And you want to have a roof over your head and you want to be able to age in place. Well, unfortunately, due to things like, the increase in utility bills and the increase in upkeep and maintenance of a home, as well as property taxes, we're finding that unfortunately incomes have not kept up with those costs, and folks are not able to financially sustain these homes. And it's really trying to sit down with folks and have these conversations and change the narrative to yes, you do have this asset that has appreciated. And what we really need to do is we really need to sell while you can pull that equity out of these homes because foreclosure is real. That they will come and they will foreclose on your home and you will lose all of that equity for just fighting because, they don't believe that they're actually going to lose their homes, or they're stubborn and they don't want to leave their homes. And so it was very difficult as a treasurer, because this was a spinoff out of our county treasurer's office, which oversees property taxes. It didn't really give the right perception to have the treasurer telling folks you need to sell your home. It just wasn't going over well. And so we really needed to we saw that this was a need, but we also knew that that's not our lane. And so that was where the opportunity came for us to build the Financial Empowerment Center. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to make sure that our community partners understood that we were not coming in to take over their space. We were just coming in to fill gaps, provide support, and provide collaboration and partnership. We are not Our job is not to be a financial counselor. Our job is to make sure that we are providing the expertise and resources to our residents. And so having this partnership with Benjamin Rose was really just one of the best decisions that ever came out of the Treasury, if I do say so myself. But, it really helped us to provide those services and to be able to provide them in a more direct way. Whereas, Benjamin Rose, they may have been seeing these residents, but they were coming with half the story. Or by the time they were getting to Benjamin Rose, it was at the point where I'm like, well, their house is going up for sale tomorrow. And so this really allowed us to be more proactive. I was able to identify folks who I was able to see going down that pathway and to be able to refer them to Benjamin Rose. We were able to collaborate on what the situation is, just as Benjamin Rose is not, experts in property taxes and foreclosure and how they work. We were not experts in providing that financial counseling, as well as understanding all of the resources that were available for them. So this partnership has just really been a godsend for a lot of the seniors in our county, to be able to have, one, we talked about the distrust in government. So, that played a part as well, where folks, no matter how nice or, smiling I wanted their house. You just want to take my home from me. And so being able to bring in a trusted institution like Benjamin Rose, really helped us have that conversation with folks. And so, we're again, it's just been a really, really good partnership. And also one of the things that, we had mentioned in our conversations before is that we feel like we've really change the model of third party administrators or partnerships, between government and nonprofits, because oftentimes the model is, the local government will say, hey, we've got this money and we've got this idea for a program. Here you go. Here's the bucket. Here's the money. Have at it, administer this program for us. And what we've done really is we have done a true partnership and collaboration where we work together. There are Benjamin Rose staff that are housed right here at the County Administration Building in the Financial Empowerment Center, which has reduced a lot of those inefficiencies that come from lack of communication or lack of collaboration. Or, we have the ability to have that just in time communication. Somebody is across the hall at the treasurer's office and they are in dire straits. They get to walk right across the hall into the Financial Empowerment Center, and they don't have to wait for a referral. They don't have to go to another location. There is a financial counselor, a Benjamin Rose financial counselor right here in-house that we're able to have them sit down with. So, the partnership has just been phenomenal. And, we have only been in existence since January 1, and we have been able to support and provide financial counseling and save the homes or help folks transition hundreds of people in the 4 months that we've been doing. I don't have the count on my head right now, but I know it's well over 250 people that we have been able to provide those services for.
Thank you. So,
I mean, whew, there's not a whole
Antoinette.
lot I should say, but what I
Thank
will
you.
say,
Yeah.
but what I will share in what I've learned, and I think that we've learned, is that real partnership means building those solutions together, right? It's not just offering those services side by side. It starts with a shared goal, and then just asking, how can we solve this together? And so we know that we've had many clients coming in who were experiencing, difficulty in paying their property taxes, and then in partnering with the county because as Victoria mentioned, there's a distrust there. And so for us, it's helping the client truly be able to digest, what is really happening and what their situation is. I think why this works, because it definitely shows the consistent communication between us, the county, and the client. I also think something that's really important to point out is literacy. A big thing that the treasurer does is sends out letters, and so everybody assumes that, the person reads it and that they're understanding it. And so I think for me, in my experience in working with many of our clients, is that literacy is a problem. They might understand one or two words, but they're not truly understanding the impact of what the letter is saying. And I think bringing that to light also is something that is really challenging in the demographics that we serve. But I think the partnership, to Victoria's point, has really just been great, and just staying focused. And when everyone is aligned and moving from, oh, I want my numbers to look like this or my numbers to look like this,
All right.
working together, right, is where we get the true impact of the services that we all provide. So that's what I'll say.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
So we think about we've talked about this as a retirement preparedness, a housing stability issue, financial vulnerability. You have a lot of competing priorities in all these conversations. And this isn't the only conversation the county treasurer has on a regular basis as well. So what are some of the things that we can do to be better able to share data or resident stories or community impact? What are some ways that we can point to either good illustrations of the challenge or good metrics of success? Because both of those are important in presenting a solution or a question like this. So how do you get a good story, and how do you talk about good outcomes?
I will first say that we first have to sometimes connect some dots for our local government. And what that means is connecting the data to real people, right? Yes, numbers matter, but also stories make it real. And I think sometimes that's what the government needs to see to make the story real. We can, both show the scale of an issue and, what it looks like in someone's life, but it becomes, a little harder, to ignore when it's actually out there and making it a real life experience. We also want to make sure that we create solutions that are easy to act on, because we all talk about, different solutions. And the first thing, if you have a long laundry list of solutions, 9 times out of 10, not a lot of that is going to be acted on. So we want to make sure that the solutions that we do present are something that it can quickly and easily be acted on from the government. And so instead of just identifying a problem, we come with a clear, kind of practical approach that shows what it looks like, who it will serve, and then how it can be implemented. So that's what I will share.
Thank you.
Good stuff, Antoinette. And also I would like to add to that is one of the goals as a government entity is that these are replicable. that we're able to provide a blueprint for the next county or for the next local government who wants to be able to, do these same problem solving or, come up with these same solutions for their residents. And so that's one thing that we try to be very careful about is that, we are not creating these programs that are just so niche that they wouldn't be able to be replicable or scaled across the state. Um, and I can tell you that one of the other things, when we talk about connecting the dots, is Antoinette is absolutely right. Oftentimes, especially when you're using taxpayer dollars, they want numbers. What was the impact? What were the numbers? They just want statistics and graphs. And it's, and those are good. They can be skewed, as we all know. We can make data look any way we want it to look. And one of the things that I have just found to be an absolute benefit of being able to collaborate so closely is to be able to hear those stories from individuals. And the more and more that I'm able to hear the actual stories, it puts me in a better position to come up with these solutions. Oftentimes I find that, the answer is, well, what was the problem? Like, this is a wonderful answer and program that you guys have just spent hundreds of millions of dollars on, but what problem are you addressing? Because they haven't dug down deep enough or been in the trenches to see what we're seeing. We are seeing, there is so much in this presentation that we're seeing every day. One of the things that I would say, always make sure that you are aware, especially us as women, that you are aware of what's going on in the finances. Because as I mentioned before, oftentimes we're finding the husbands are passing away before the wives, and they're left absolutely having no idea of where their finances stand. I've had women come in, here and say, oh my gosh, my husband had a reverse mortgage on the house and I knew nothing about it and I'm getting foreclosed on. There's no equity left and I don't have anywhere to go. I have women that come in and say, he selected the pension option that gave bigger payouts during his while he was alive, but then there's no, benefit for me now that he's gone, and they don't know. They're just shocked, so on top of, losing, the death of your spouse, they're now faced with these financial crises that they had no idea. I have wives who, were not on the deed of the home, and, we're struggling to figure out, how do we allow them to get that, without having to go through this long probate. And so, I think that, that understanding and being able to actually drill down at the individual level and to see how prevalent a problem is has also allowed us, as the government who does have just a little bit more pockets and a little bit more, ability to advocate and direct policy, to really come up with solutions to real problems and not just assumptions of what problems are or the problem that some politician or bureaucrat decided out of the data that they received, the one page of, graphs that they saw, and to, just try to come up with these solutions to things that weren't actually the root cause of the problem. So that, has really been a benefit to this partnership because oftentimes when you're in government, again, you're going back to distrust. People aren't telling us the truth. And so, I highly doubt that, someone would have come in and told me, the Treasury, hey, my husband put a reverse mortgage on the house several years ago and I wasn't aware of it. What are my options? They're not going to say that to me. They're just not going to come talk to me at all. But having that ability to, have the softer side of Benjamin Rose, who's been a trusted partner in this community for decades, really, enhances that communication and allows us to get to the truth of what the root cause of these are, and then also to be able to come up with solutions that are really going to be directed at those problems and not just the assumption or perception of what the problem is.
Yeah, I love everything you're saying, Victoria, but also what comes back to also we need to save those stories. The loss of equity, the I mean, a lot of this goes back to communication within a marriage, if you're on some of these things, or within families, to be sure. But I think the actual stories and the outcome for that older person are really, those are the important ones to hold on to. Because, and I know during the pandemic, Wiser was like the blowing up because we had so many questions from the surviving spouse, the woman who did not die of COVID, but her husband did, and she knew absolutely nothing about the finances. So I think the more those stories, in their simplest form, get to the ears of those who can change, either the budgets or whatever, are really critical. That they don't have to be long and involved stories, but they need to be, this is what happened, this is why, this is what, da, da, da. And I can tell you, I've talked to all kinds of fancy people on the Hill and la-di-da, this and that. I mean, every time we talk about this issue, one way or another, before I leave whatever that little, meeting is, that person will like walk me to the door and tell me the story about in their family, this financial exploitation happened. And da, 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 da. So they all know it. But I think focusing on those crisp stories is critical to moving the ball.
Thank you so much.
I can't say that more how I completely agree. I used case studies starting with my mother years ago, and I'd give a presentation, and if I started out with data, people would be like, "Oh, I don't understand this." And then you tell the story, and they'd be like, "How did you know about my aunt? How did you know about my sister?"
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the data is meaningful. So real case studies with disguised names are invaluable for any kind of problem.
Well, we've some great examples here. We've talked about some great solutions and great tools that are there, and we're going to have an opportunity for more questions from folks that have joined us online today. Before we do that, I want to direct one question. I'll start with Cindy, but ask it to everybody. But so we've talked about the tools that are available and the things that are there, but we know people don't always have the conversation anyway. So what are some things we can do to help encourage people to have those discussions about the retirement planning or the financial issues or the challenges? And Cindy, we'll start with you and then open it up to everyone.
Well, I was going to mention how ignorant a lot of people are of just the very basics. Like I've encountered counselors all over the country that, educate on the state level. And when you tell them that there's a Medicare premium that people have to pay, they don't know. And that's a pretty big chunk out of your Social Security, right? To have your Medicare premium taken off the top. So I have a list of those gotchas, like the things that people should do that I'm happy to share, and maybe you can use them.
One of the biggest challenges and problems is getting people to have conversations. And when you are trying to get people to have conversations, it's very hard to structure them. The Society of Actuaries partnered with the University of Minnesota and the AARP for a really good set of material that is both research to support it and then tools to use it on thinking ahead, keeping your money safe as you age. And I'll send along the link for that in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I also think
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I agree definitely with Anna, but I also think there's a level of relatability, right? They have to know that, we've all kind of not necessarily on a large scale, but experienced some of it ourselves, right? And then that opens up the gate to say, oh, wow, like I'm not alone. Like this person who is trying to help me has even experienced some things. And so I think being honest and truthful in our own situation sometimes will help drive that conversation better with people too.
I think that's really true. I also like to target younger people. I mean, I have kids that are in their late 20s, early 30s, and they've watched me take care of their grandparents, and so they kind of see some of that. But I think where I've gotten a lot of great feedback is when I do these conferences. where you get a real different demographic than you might expect. And to be able to pitch it to, you're not just pitching it to the people. I always say, who are the families you're taking care of? Who are the other people that you touch in your professional life? And I think that you can, I'm all for the multi-generational message, because I think we all have to look at this in a multi-generational way. It isn't just like grandma gets old and then you take care of her because you're next in line. And when you get old, I'll take care of you. It's really looking across the family, because you don't know how that's all going to play out. And your decision about what's going to happen next isn't necessarily the way things happen. We all know life is not a straight line, but I think it's really important to stress all of that to younger people as well. So it isn't just the 50, 60-year-olds who are taking care of the 70, 80, 90-year-olds. So I'm a big believer in a multi-generation, because it's education for them too, about how to plan for their own future, at the same time know that they will also be needing to care for someone else at some point along the line. So that's my.
Judith, oh, sorry. Say, Judith, you're preaching to the choir in a previous life. I have 20 years of academic experience. I worked in a community college for 20 years. And, one of the things that I think that our generation takes for granted is that when the Bush era education changes with the No Child Left Behind happened, that was when we started pulling out home economics, financial classes, things like that. And what I am seeing now with I would say 30 somethings and under, they are not financially experienced or financially literate in so many things that, oftentimes those conversations really need to be had at an almost, rudimentary level, because they are not coming to the table with, we sat around and our moms taught us how to write checks.
Right.
These kids don't even know how to sign their name in cursive,
That's right.
And so I
Yeah.
think that,
Yeah.
one of the things that that our parents had the luxury of is knowing that, we had some foundational understanding of financial literacy. We had jobs at 13 and 14. I don't know about you guys, but
Oh,
I had to give my paycheck to my mom because I didn't have a bank account, and she dished it out to me. And you learned a lot of things through that process. Whereas I'm finding that this younger generation, literally, as you were speaking, that we have kids that are living with their parents and the house is going into foreclosure. And I have to have these conversations with these grown children. Like, you're going to be homeless too if you don't help your mom pay these property taxes.
right.
And those dots are just like they don't believe that it's true. It's just a very interesting, again, 20 years in education. I am in a very interesting phase in my life of some of the conversations that I'm having with adults who just seem clueless as to how to manage any finances.
Yeah.
30-year-olds are living at home with their parents. Like,
I know.
it's crazy.
One of the things that in my own personal experience, having a younger brother with profound developmental disabilities, and so these conversations happened at my house really early, because there was always a conversation about providing for my brother, and but my dad, going through the filing cabinet of this. This is where this is, and this is where this is, and this is where the account is, and this is where my mother used to say, he could spend more time fiddling over no money than anybody she knew. But you had that dialogue, and I realized that not everybody gets exposed to it that way, because the setting that in my 20s we had the conversations about what happens if, and the opportunity to be a part of that, and and all the opportunities to have the conversation and pursue it. And I think and another part of this for folks, I mean, a lot of the folks that are on a call like this are coming from the aging setting, but I think we also have to appreciate that for a lot of people, these caregiving conversations or the planning conversations or the end of life conversations, they're not happening first with the kids and the parents or with their doctor. They're happening with the banker. They're happening with the guy at Stiefel that's got their retirement account. They're happening with the HR person who manages the company plans. Those. So making sure that people across those financial services programs
Right.
know about how to direct people to some of these programs, just like making sure that the folks on the aging side of the equation do that.
All right. Totally
Great
agree.
discussion. I have one here from the Q&A section. Somebody had some questions about the types of trust or where to get information about that. And all I know to say is I'm not an attorney or a financial planner. But what are some recommendations we can give people about exploring more information about trust, since we talked about those today?
The CFPB document on trusts is a really good document to say, what is a trust? What do I need to know about it? What do I have to do? I'm not a lawyer either, but that's where I send people first. And Judith probably knows a lot more. She's a lawyer. And Cindy.
Well, yeah, and yeah, right. Well, trust can be wonderful and terrible. They can be a great tool, but they can also become overly complicated for no good reason, in my view. I love them because they're incredibly elastic. So I send people to NALA, to the National Elder Law Association, and they have some resources there that are general for looking at trusts in preparing documents for older adults. I think the CFPB publication is a good one for very, very, very general information. I think that it also, there's a huge difference between irrevocable and irrevocable trust. So you want to make sure you know what you're talking about. If you're interested in doing a trust, you really do need to contact a lawyer to make sure it adheres to the state laws that would govern a trust, and whether or not it's worth it for you, all of those things. Because I've seen them be a wonderful document. I've seen them tie up estates for years that go on forever. I mean, there's one family that I'm very close to that spent 6 years in probate, unwinding 2 or 3 different trusts. You don't want to find yourself there if you can help it. And by the time you're done with the legal fees, there's not much left for anybody else. So you want to make sure if you're doing a trust that you have some legal guidance with doing that. But just to look it up, there's a lot of just good information online just to find out, what is a revocable trust, what's an irrevocable trust, how do I set up a trust for my grandpa? You can just ask those general questions to Google, and you'll get very general information. If you need specific stuff, I would definitely go back to NALA, which is the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys. And I would take a look at the CFPB document just to get started. And that's good. So Dr. Berry says they have a program in Cuyahoga County on great estates. That would be fabulous if we were able to access that kind of information. Because they can be both a wonderful document and if they're not done well, can be complicated.
I want to also caution people when they go online, don't just get a document and use it. That is really dangerous.
No. Information.
You need a good lawyer, and one of the best ways to find them is to find somebody in your situation and see if they have a recommendation, or go to your local bar association. There are a number of ways. You really need legal help, and don't try to do it yourself. That's scary.
Right. And there are also legal services providers who will do that for low income individuals. So that's available through bar councils.
So the state bar usually will have information about an elder law section to do that.
Right.
The local legal aid society or legal service association in the community may offer some of those services for folks that
right. County bar, and county bar associations do too. So I mean, I think so don't just think you have to have money to go to a fancy lawyer. That's not true. But you do need to kind of figure out, just learn a little bit about what a trust is before you start asking questions about it, and they can help you.
And remember, the area agency on aging, if you don't know where to go, that's where you always can go to find out, where do I go?
Right. Right.
And if you're looking for your area agency on aging and don't know where that is, um, and there's a great resource called the Elder Care Locator that you can find at the U.S. Aging website that'll tell you who that organization is in whatever zip code or county you're in anywhere in the country. So some great resources there.
Yeah, you can also go to the American Bar Association Council on Law and Aging is another place that you can go. They also have a state by state, zip code by zip code contact list too.
Okay, great. So there were a couple of questions there just about access to attorneys and questions about trust. And I think we've been able to present some answers for that. So there's a question here too about property tax programs for older adults, referencing things like homestead exemptions and those kind of things. I realize that's going to be different from state to state, but are there property tax regulations or rules that you would like to see, or ones you think that have been effective in managing the property tax question for an older adult on a fixed income?
So I am not an expert in property taxes in other states except for Ohio. And I can tell you that in Ohio, it's broken. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there that it is broken. And so a homestead exemption in Ohio, what that does is if you are 65 years of age or older and have a household income of $40,000 a year or less. So we're talking that it does not cover a lot of folks. And if it's, so it does not include Social Security, but it does include pension. And most of us that, well, knock on wood, most of us that would be retiring with a pension are likely to be over that $40,000 a year threshold. So that's the first problem, is that it has not kept up with inflation and other expenses. And also understanding that the exemption is it's a reduction in the property taxes. What it does is it reduces the taxable value of your property by $25,000. So your home is valued at $100,000. We would take $25,000 off of that and we would be taxing at that 75,000. So it's not something where it's across the board, those individuals would not have a property tax obligation unless, of course, their house was a very low value. And the reason that it has not been very high on the list of priorities, well, there's two reasons. One, the state isn't that motivated to expand that exemption because they have to subsidize every penny of that. So for every exemption that's given, the state subsidizes those dollars to make that municipality whole. So you can imagine that unless somebody brings it to their attention, that's not something they're jumping out to say, hey, let's expand homestead. Two, we have not held our legislators to the fire about how it's impacting. It's unfortunate that property values in Ohio just really kind of caught up with the nationwide trend of the increase in values. And so it is just over these last couple of years that we've seen our property values increase to the point where property taxes are really a huge burden on our seniors. And so it is our hope that, now that it's a burden for, not just the poor and the desolate, it's becoming a burden for those that are also middle income, that we're now going to be able to see a little bit more advocacy for our state legislators to make some changes, because the only change they've made in our homestead exemption in like 15, 20 years was they implemented the income requirement. So before 2013, there was no income requirement. 2013, they came with that very low income requirement. And so I don't know if you're from Ohio, but if you are, you've heard that, it's becoming such an issue that now there's actually a push to abolish property taxes completely, which finally got the attention of our state legislators because that would be an absolute disaster for our
Mhm.
state. And so, sometimes, what is it, extreme, situations require extreme measures. And it wasn't until they really saw that there is a chance that property taxes could get abolished in the state of Ohio, that they're finally having those discussions about, okay, how can we start to help? And because it's especially our seniors, of course, we know that's the highest voting population traditionally, and now that it's really impacting them and they're losing their homes, and these fixed incomes are not keeping up with the increases in the property taxes. And so that's kind of the situation of, the homestead exemption in Ohio. I do know that there are other states that just, total exemption of property taxes for seniors, but that is just not the case in Ohio. And we are seeing our seniors it's just been devastating watching our seniors lose their homes due to property taxes and the fact that there's nowhere else to go. So even if you have some equity in your home and have the opportunity to sell, where are you going to go? There's,
Right. That's
limited,
the problem.
yeah, where
That's
do
the
I
problem.
go?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So, wow. The time has just flown by, and Megan came back into the screen, so that means the
That's how you
timekeeper is
know.
back with us again. So we're So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. There are questions or comments in the chat. We will try to we'll capture all those and respond back to those uh, after the broadcast if we didn't get to those today. And also, please remember your program evaluation. It's been dropped into the chat, especially if you need CEUs today. CEUs today, make sure that you complete the evaluation link. Uh, Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to our participants. Megan, I'm going to turn it all back over to you to close us out today.
Thank you so much. You took the words right out of my mouth. I hate to end because we're having such good conversations, but again, I appreciate all of our panelists and keynote for coming out here today and talking about these so very important issues. Like Orion said, the evaluation has been dropped into the chat. Again, if you need CEUs, please fill that out. I'm just going to talk about a few other programs that are coming up virtually from Benjamin Rose. The first one on May 21st, we will be having the program Elder Care Options and How to Prepare for Them, featuring Eric Saylor, owner and senior care advisor of Care Patrol, for a hands-on look about how to create your own plan to address future care needs. Very relevant for today's topic. And then on June 18th, we will have our quarter two advocacy webinar with subject matter experts Dr. Jennifer Lawrence and Allie Armisen from fightcybercrime.org and policy specialist Bob Lancato to discuss online scams, evidence-based interventions, and policies to reduce harm. So you can register for all those programs and more on our website, www.benjaminrose.org, benrose.org, excuse me. So thank you so much again, everyone, for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Mhm.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.